All right, here I am with my 2021-22 divisions and bracket predictions for the NHL. Um, we'll start things off with the Metro, and before we actually get started on all these bracket things, I'm just going to go through all the teams that I think or how I think the divisions are going to go, how everyone's going to line up in them, who's going to be facing who in the playoffs, and why, I guess. Just going through a few points on every team quick, and it should be pretty fun because the bracket I have set up right now that I wrote out earlier just to make sure it actually worked. There's a lot of really, really dramatic series in there that I want to cover. Be prepared for the next year's playoffs because they very well could be something to be proud of. This is going to be a really sweet year for hockey. So starting in the Metro, which I believe, I might be a little bit biased here, but I believe this is the toughest division in the league right now. I don't think it's a contest. Maybe like the next best, I would say is I don't think the Central's the next best. I think the Atlantic would be the next best, but even that's a bit of a stretch because I'll tell you why in a sec. So number one, I think Carolina is topping the division. I think they're going to be first in the entire division, not the conference. I think Tampa's going to be first in the conference, but we'll get to them later. Carolina, they lost Peter Mrazek and Nedeljkovic, who is supposed to be their up-and-coming goaltender. They do have Frederick Anderson, though, and they picked up Tony DeAngelo, very good offensive defenseman despite his history. I wish them nothing but the best. Carolina's a fun team to watch. They could very well go on a run this year. They might climb that little hump they've been struggling to get over the past few years here. Second place, and call it biased all you want, but I think the New York Rangers are going to finish second in the Metro Division. They recently just got Ryan Reeves, Barclay Goodrow, Sammy Blais, and Jared Tenorti. They traded away one of their large pieces, Pavel Buchnevich, and I believe they might be trading Georgiev at some point as well. There's a lot of talks about that Jack Eichel trade that could be going down, but it hasn't happened yet, obviously, and this is my prediction before all of that goes down. So I believe the Rangers are going to take a big step this year, and every other team in the division, I believe, is going to take a little bit of a step backwards. At least the ones that made the playoffs last year. Carolina does not look as good as they did last year, I don't think, in my opinion. They lost Dougie Hamilton. The Islanders, they're a proven contender, and they're number 3 here in the Metro. So they've made the third round and lost to Tampa Bay back-to-back years now. They're obviously a proven contender. They've put up a good fight both times, made it 6 and 7 games respectively, but they're not a regular season team. They're average at best in the regular season. They play shutdown hockey, but it doesn't hold up against all the teams in the league. Teams crack it very easily in the regular season, it seems like, and they pull through in the playoffs in those tight series. But you don't win anything in the regular season by winning every second game and then sneaking out a win in the game 7 or something like that. It doesn't work in the regular season. They're going to finish third in the Metro. Other teams are just going to get streaky. They're not a streaky team. And then number 4, and this is the last team I have in the Metro making the playoffs, which I debated for a long time about if I put 5 Metro teams in the playoffs or if I split it 4-4 with the Atlantic. But I'm going to say, splitting it 4-4, I'm not going to go crazy here. Washington makes the playoffs in the 4 seed, wild card number 1 for the East Division. So Ovi and Backstrom and all them, they're on the decline. They're obviously not as good as they used to be. Oshie's aging. Their core is aging. They might trade Kuznetsov at some point. I don't think they're anywhere near as good as they were last year or the year before or the year before that. They keep getting marginally worse every year, but they're still a playoff team. There's no doubt in my mind. They still have good goaltending, good defense. They still have their main pieces of the core there. I don't think there's a problem there yet. But the next one is pretty interesting because I have Pittsburgh missing the playoffs. They don't have a solid starter. Tristan Jarry is not a good starter for them. Their core is aging. Malkin is still coming off that knee injury. There's no there's no confirmation on if he's going to be back yet at the start of the season, or if he's going to be 100% for that matter. Crosby, I think, would be the only reason these guys make the playoffs, is if Crosby stands up and has a career year. But like I said, I think the 4 teams in the Metro making the playoffs are Carolina, New York Rangers, New York Islanders, and Capitals. Pittsburgh being a close miss, and then number 6, Philadelphia. Carter Hart and Brian Elliott were the worst goaltending tandem in the entire league last year. They had the worst goals against average in the entire league. Philadelphia had many catastrophic losses in the competitive East Division last year, including a 9-0 loss against the Rangers. That one game, I keep mentioning the Rangers, I don't mean to. They come up in a few points. But Philadelphia's missing. They're coming in 6th in the division. It's just too competitive of a division for them to take backward steps like that. They can't do that. And then number 7, New Jersey Devils. And this was a tough choice between putting them at 7 or 6, because I think they're actually going to really improve this year. I think they're going to be a competitive team. The Metro is a very competitive division from start to bottom. Every team in there, I feel like I can make a case for to make the playoffs in like a different division. But right now, New Jersey is still a year or 2 away from the playoffs, in my opinion. Maybe when Washington falls off the map with Ovi and Backstrom on the decline, maybe that's when they break into it and take over Washington's spot, and maybe next year even, depending on how good their prospects do. And last place in the Metro Division, I don't think this is coming as a surprise to anybody. They're obviously going through another tough, sad rebuild. The Columbus Blue Jackets, nothing crazy there. They're the weak link in this division. They have nothing going for them. They have Patrick Laine, I guess, but he's not carrying their team to a playoff spot. This is too tough of a division. They won't be able to do it. They had a terrible season last year. They were last place in a much easier division last year, and I don't think they're going to be able to come back from that. So that's the Metro Division. That's the toughest division, in my opinion, considering the worst team is Columbus, and the next worst is New Jersey. New Jersey's not a terrible team. They genuinely, I think even the Pacific Division, New Jersey would beat out who I have making the playoffs in that division for the 3rd spot, which I'll get to that in a bit. But for now, we're going to go to the other side of the East, to the Atlantic Division. Number 1, Tampa Bay Lightning. Everyone thought that their season was going to be terrible, I guess, considering how much cap space they had extra in the playoffs. But they've made it work. They got Corey Perry, which is an incredible addition. They lost David Savard, so they're shut-down defender, but this is the most likely team I've ever seen to go for a three-peat. I genuinely think Tampa Bay has what it takes to go for a 3rd cup in a row. They still have their entire core intact. They lost Yanni Gourde, obviously, to the expansion draft, but that's not terrible. They did good. And I guess they lost Barclay Goodrow, but other than that, they can find replacements. They are not in a terrible spot at all whatsoever. If you told me that Corey Perry would go there in exchange for losing David Savard and losing Yanni Gourde and losing all that, that's not terrible. I'm fine with that. That would be a good trade, in my opinion, for Tampa Bay to have, and that was well done by them. They're going for it until they're out of contention. They might have a tough rebuild ahead of them once Stamkos and Kucherov and that core goes under, but that's not for a while now. Second in the Atlantic, and this division's actually really funny for me because there's a lot of rivalries I like about this. We got second place Boston. They got rid of Rask and Halak and Dan Vladar. So basically their 3 best goaltenders they got rid of, which is usually not a move you're supposed to make in an off season. But they got Buffalo starter Linus Ullmark, which is incredible. I think that's a very good choice, an upgrade in my opinion. They still have Taylor Hall. He gelled really well with the team. The core seems to be in a solid window for a few years at least. I don't see them slipping out of a playoff spot anytime soon. I'd give it 2 or 3 years at the minimum before they miss the playoffs. Number 3, Toronto Maple Leafs. They got Peter Mrazek, lost Frederik Andersen. They're still looking like a solid regular season team. I mean, I don't see them losing out on much. They lost Joe Thornton, but he doesn't put up many numbers. He was just kind of there's a veteran presence, but they have veteran presence. They have Jason Spezza. They have like these players that want to win, but I don't think Joe Thornton was the answer for them at all. But yeah, I don't think there's any question as to why Toronto would make the playoffs. They're still a good team, just despite what they do in the playoffs every year. And then number 4, this one I was torn between putting this team as a playoff team or putting Pittsburgh as a playoff team for the second wildcard spot. Number 4 in the Atlantic, I got Florida. They got Sam Reinhart and Joe Thornton. Those are 2 very, very heavy, underlooked additions that Florida made. And considering the season they had last year in a pretty competitive division with Carolina and Tampa Bay and like those kind of teams, like there was a lot of competition there, and they held their ground against Tampa Bay in that first round. That could have went either way. They played very well. I believe they improved just by getting Sam Reinhart. That's an amazing pickup. But yeah, that's the last team in the entire East Division I have making the playoffs. This next pick might be a bit of a hot take and a bit of a tough pill to swallow for some of you that I know watch these. Very, very competitive you guys are. And I know you guys just went on that playoff run, but number 5, missing the playoffs in the Atlantic, Montreal Canadiens. They lost Corey Perry, they lost Philip Deneau, they're shut down centerman, and they will likely not have Weber back ever. So they lose their captain, they lose their shutdown centerman, and they lose their veteran presence. You wiped Montreal off the board. All they have is their prospects. They're not going to carry them to a playoff position ahead of Pittsburgh and ahead of Florida or ahead of Toronto or Boston or the Islanders. They're not better than those teams. It's not going to happen. Ottawa at number 6, and I could honestly say Ottawa overtaking Montreal this year. The young core there is still growing. They're taking a lot of large steps from last season. The end of the season, they were on a bit of a heater. They were playing very well. And I would not doubt that Ottawa wins something very, very soon. I genuinely think the next Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup is going to be the Ottawa Senators. And you can mark my words on that. It's right there in the video. You can look it back up if you so please. Ottawa Senators will be the next Canadian team to win a Stanley Cup. They're only a few years away from contention. I have a gut feeling about that. And then number 7, you got Detroit. It's very similar to Ottawa. They got Alex Nedeljkovic, which is an incredible goaltending pickup. Steve Yzerman, the GM for that team, has just been putting on a show. That was an incredible trade. Traded Jonathan Bernier in like a 4th round pick for an up-and-coming star goaltender. It's incredible. And then the boiler room of the East, we got Buffalo. They're in another rebuild. They got rid of almost all their key pieces except for Jack Eichel at this point. They were trying to make a run last year. They did not make that work. It will not work this year, whatever they're doing. There's nothing I can even say that would say Buffalo improved in any way, shape, or form. They lost their best goaltender. They lost their best defender. They will lose Jack Eichel. There's no way he's playing for them again, in my opinion. They're not letting him get the surgery he needs to play again, and he 100% asked for a trade. There's no thing you can say to me otherwise that Jack Eichel's on their team when the season starts. There's no way. So that's the East for you. And then we got the Central. In the West, number 1 in the Central is Colorado. They lost Philip Grubauer, but they remain a contender because they picked up Darcy Kemper, and that's an upgrade in net, in my opinion. Darcy Kemper is a very underrated goalie. This division is probably one of the more stacked divisions. I had a tough time choosing just 4 or 5 teams to make it. I actually have 5 teams making it from this division because I believe it's so stacked that the Pacific's not going to be able to keep up with it. So, Colorado first. I don't think anyone's going to be doubting that. And then second is a bit of a wild card because Kirill Kaprizov has not signed with the Wild yet, again, but I have Minnesota as the second seed in the Central. They did very good last year. I really love seeing Minnesota do good. They did really good last year. They showed a lot of signs of becoming a legitimate team, contender, like above that middle like purgatory level they've been at for the past decade. So yeah, I think Minnesota's coming in second in the division. And number 3, we got Winnipeg. They picked up Nate Schmidt. They picked up Brendan Dillon. They took a lot of really, really big competitive steps last year. They were up there in the mix for the top team in the North for a while, but Toronto ended up pulling through with that, and Edmonton got ahead of them. But Winnipeg played very, very impressive at the start of last season, and I believe Winnipeg's coming in third in the Central. Number 4, maybe a little bit of a hot take considering they just went to a rebuild last year, and I'm not sure what on earth they are doing. But it might work. I need to take a sip of water for this one because this is a lot of names. We got Chicago. Chicago Blackhawks. They're getting Jonathan Toews back, their captain. They signed Marc-Andre Fleury. They signed Seth Jones to that huge contract. They got Josh Dickinson. I think they're going to be the first wild card in the West. This isn't a terrible team to be looking at right now. DeBrincat, all these young prospects coming up. I think Chicago could very well make the playoffs and could very well pull off an upset, given like Taves and Kane and all them, their veteran leadership. I think that if any team was going to upset, it would be Chicago. And then we got Dallas. Dallas coming back from the dead from last year. They didn't make the playoffs. They got beaten out by Nashville, but they did not have Ben Bishop. I think he's still hurt now, but they got Braden Holtby to fill that spot. Braden Holtby is a good goaltender. He had an off year with Vancouver, but he won a cup in 2018 with Washington, and I believe Holtby is a good addition to Dallas. I think they could still make a run with that. They got Tyler Seguin back, which is a huge loss they had last year. They have Ryan Suter now, and they lost Jason Dickinson. Overall, I think they improved from last season. I think even having Seguin back would make it a case to be back in the playoffs. But I was really torn between picking Dallas or St. Louis. And at St. Louis I have at number 6 in the Central because they picked up Pavel Buchnevich and Brandon Saad. They lost Sammy Blais, but Buchnevich is a very, very good snag for them. That was a good trade on their part. I don't think the Rangers won that trade in any stretch of the word. Buchnevich was a first-line, almost a point-per-game player last year, and he would fit very well in with St. Louis. It almost feels like he might be Tarasenko's replacement. So, I don't know how I feel about that. I like Buchnevich. I think he will play very good in St. Louis, but he's definitely Tarasenko's replacement. I don't see the way they're having both of them next year. Tarasenko's going to get traded or signed by somebody else, or he's not going to play. I don't think they're making the playoffs, though. I don't think they have what it takes this year to make the playoffs. Too much is going on for them. And number 7, I think it's rebuild time for Nashville, finally. They lucked in a playoff from goaltending last year. They're selling some key pieces. They were willing to give up Matt Duchene, and they gave up Victor Arvidsson. They didn't actually give up Matt Duchene, but they were willing to in the expansion draft. They were willing to give up these big name guys to try and get something going for them, maybe prospect-wise or for picks. I think they're finally deciding to call it quits on this window that they have been trying to keep open for a few years now, since I believe 2017 when they made that run. I think the last truly competitive year for them was 2019, but they got upset by Dallas, ironically. And then number 8, they're clearly rebuilding. There's no way in hell I see them doing anything this year. It's Arizona Coyotes. They lost Darcy Kemper, their star goaltender. They lost Ekman Larson. They lost Connor Garland. they have nothing going for them. They're at the boiler room of the Central. They're first overall pick territory for next year, even. I don't know. Okay, last division before we get to the fun stuff. I promise. We'll get to the bracket after this. In the Pacific, this is by far the weakest division in the entire league. No question. Number 1 is Vegas. They're the clear favorite to win this division. There's no other contender at all in the division. They lost Fleury, they got Bretton Howden, they lost Ryan Reeves, but they got Evgeny Dadonov for Nick Holden. That was a pretty decent trade for them, I think. I don't think they improved. They kind of lost their identity guy with Ryan Reeves, but there's no good team in the Pacific. Because number 2, we have Edmonton. And Edmonton's not a contender. They have McDavid, they have Draisaitl, and they got Warren Fogle for Ethan Bear. They got Duncan Keith. Their chips are on the table going for a run, but they're not going to. Edmonton doesn't do that. They just do good in regular season, and they screw up in the first round. They're the Toronto of the West. Number 3, and this is really showing how easy of a division this really is. We have the Los Angeles Kings, who have been in a rebuild for the past few years, but I believe this is the year they take a next step. I think they're making it. I think they might do some damage. This is number 3 in the Pacific, obviously. They got Philip Deneau from Montreal, which is huge. That's their big shutdown guy now. And then now they got Victor Arvidsson from Nashville. They got Brendan Lemieux from the Rangers. They got Quinton Byfield's going to be called up likely this year to play with them. The number 2 overall pick from 2019. Or not 2019. 2020. After Lafreniere. So I think LA is making the playoffs. That's the number 3 seed in the Pacific. Number 4, we have Vancouver. And I have them missing the playoffs still as the number 4 seed in the Pacific. They got Ekman Larson and Connor Garland, which are good. They got rid of Louis Eriksson and Jay Beagle, which I think is good. But I think Elias Pettersson may want to trade, and Jason Dixon got signed. So overall, they had a good offseason. I'm happy with what Vancouver did as the offseason, but I don't think they're cracking the playoffs. I think LA may beat them out for it. I don't know. That might be a hot take here. That's one of the bigger hot takes of the video, I think, as well as Montreal missing the playoffs, and Chicago making the playoffs, and Pittsburgh missing. This is one of those hot takes, as Vancouver missing the playoffs with all the things they've done. And then you got number 5 in the Pacific, Calgary. They lost Sam Bennett. They got Nikita Zadorov and Dan Vladar, like the 3rd best goalie on Boston, and they signed Tyler Pitlick. Calgary's nothing to write home about. They just kind of suck. I don't know what else to say. Number 6, the epitome of bad rebuild, the San Jose Sharks. They signed Andrew Cogliano and Aiden Hill, but they are still in a terrible rebuild phase. They have nothing going for them. They need to turn on the Jets if they want to win something soon. Their core is aging fast. Number 7, we got Seattle, the new team coming into the league. Their best player on the entire roster is Yanni Gourde, former third-line player for Tampa Bay. They're not going to do anything this year. I wouldn't count on it. I think they're prepared for the future. And then, number 8, this might be the worst team in the entire league. Anaheim Ducks. They have a pretty bad road for this next year or two. They're one of the worst teams in the league right now. Even with the good prospects they have, like Carter Kell, Jamie Drysdale, all those guys. There's no way they're making the playoffs. They're terrible. So, now that you waited this long, we'll get to the bracket and how a playoff would look like if my predictions are correct. I wouldn't count on this being exactly correct. There's no way I will guess every single thing being right about this. But we'll start off with the first series here in the East. We got Tampa Bay versus Florida. The first round rematch from last year. I think Tampa Bay is winning it. I don't think Florida's ready to take that step yet. I know they have Joe Thornton. I know they have Sam Reinhart. But Tampa Bay is Tampa Bay. And they're not going to go out from Florida. They're not. They're going out swinging. So then, the next series in the Atlantic, the second place and third place teams, Boston Bruins and Toronto Maple Leafs. fully predict these two freight trains are going to be colliding this year again. And I'm here for it. I cannot wait. So, I do have Boston winning. I would love for Toronto to win that series just because I really don't like Boston. I kind of like Toronto. But I think Boston's winning it. Like, I can't bet against Boston and I can't bet for Toronto. It just can't happen anymore. Not until they win a series. That's going to be when I draw the line for Toronto. I can't have them winning anything. So, out of Tampa Bay and Boston, I think Tampa Bay is winning. I don't really have any questions there for that. Like, Tampa Bay is better than Boston, in my opinion. They should beat Boston. Unless Boston takes a huge step in the right direction with Allmark and all of them, and Hall plays good. I don't know. I think Tampa Bay's they're going to the conference finals. So, as for the Metro teams, we have a few really interesting series to talk about here. So the first one, we got the first place, Carolina Hurricanes versus the first wild card, the Washington Capitals. This is an exact rematch with the sides flipped from 2019, with Carolina being the wild card team and Washington topping the division, and I think Carolina's taking this one as well. Washington's not going to get it done in the playoffs. Carolina has all the pieces ready. Washington's still scraping the barrel. Let's see what they can get out of themselves. So Carolina moves on to round 2, and then the second and third place teams in the Metro Division, the New York teams, the Islanders versus the Rangers. Or I guess Rangers number 2 seed, Islanders number 3 seed. Rangers versus Islanders. I have the Rangers winning this series. As funny as that is. I think the Islanders' run is going to be kind of over soon. They haven't really made any crazy big changes or moves to help themselves, and I think the Rangers took a lot of steps in the right direction this offseason to become tougher to play against, and I think that the Islanders are going to have a tough time playing against them and breaking through a 7-game series with the Rangers. I think Rangers have it. So out of Carolina versus New York, I have Carolina winning. I'm not incredibly biased towards my team, don't worry. The Rangers aren't winning the cup in this bracket. Carolina beats the Rangers in round 2, and it's a Tampa Bay Lightning versus Carolina Hurricanes conference final, and I think Tampa Bay takes that. Just like last year, it was pretty swift. Carolina didn't put up much of a fight last year against Tampa Bay, and it was kind of sad. I wanted that to be a bit of a longer series. But Tampa Bay makes it to the finals in the East. No surprise there, I don't think. I think a lot of people see this freight train not getting derailed anytime soon. So in the West, we got the first in the Pacific versus the second wildcard team. We got Vegas versus Dallas. The rematch from the Stanley Cup, not the Stanley Cup, the conference finals from 2 years ago, 2 playoffs ago. Obviously, Dallas won that series in 5 in overtime. But I think Vegas has what it takes to win this series. I think Vegas is beating Dallas in round 1. And then the second place Pacific team and the third place Pacific team, we got Edmonton versus LA. I think LA takes it. Just like the moves that LA's made, I think outweigh what Edmonton's done in a playoff series. I think LA's got that. Hot take, obviously. Out of Vegas and LA, I don't think anything crazy is going to happen there. I think Vegas takes it. That's actually a rematch series from 2018. It's the first playoff series that Vegas was ever a part of. It was against LA, and they swept them. And I think the same sort of thing could happen this time. Vegas is a lot better than LA. There's no question about that. I think Vegas is taking that series, and they're going to the conference finals in the West. So then we got the first place Central team versus the first wild card. We got Colorado versus Chicago, which could be a pretty fun series considering the moves Chicago's made. But I think Colorado eventually takes that series. I'm taking the top team there, whatever. Colorado's a pretty big contender here. I think it's happening this year. Like, they're going on a pretty big run. So then we got another rematch series, this one from 2018. We got Minnesota versus Winnipeg. And I think the different team's going to come out ahead this time. I think Minnesota beats Winnipeg in the series, and they face off against Colorado. Another rematch series. Last year, Colorado and Minnesota played an incredible 7-game series. Very few goals involved in that, but it was a good series nonetheless. I think Colorado takes it this time as well, but it could go either way. They're two very, very competitive teams. I think Colorado has more of what it takes to win a cup than Minnesota, but Minnesota's got some promising young guys that could win them something. So we got Colorado versus Vegas in the conference finals, and I think Colorado takes that series this time. I think it's happening this time. These two freight trains are going to collide. They're the two best teams in the West, no question about it. I want to see another series between these two teams because last year there just wasn't enough. It felt almost like a fluke that Vegas came back and won that series 4 straight. So, the finals. This is the Stanley Cup final that I had predicted for last year, and this is the Stanley Cup final that I predicted for the year before that. It's the Tampa Bay Lightning versus the Colorado Avalanche. And these are the two best teams in the entire league. No question about it. I think both of these teams should make the finals. They're two freight trains ready to collide. I've used that terminology a lot this video, but I would watch out for it. This would be a really, really incredible series. I have Tampa Bay winning the cup again. I have Tampa Bay three-peating. The first time in God knows how long, probably since the Edmonton dynasty back in the 80s and whatnot. But I'd say Tampa Bay takes the cup in 6 games against Colorado. So that's it. That's my really, really way too early, before the season even starts, division and bracket predictions, and who I think would win the Stanley Cup for 2022, I guess, would be the year. Yeah. So let me know how I did. Like the video. Subscribe if you want to hear more of my hockey ramblings. Text me to talk about hockey. I don't know. Message me video ideas. And you guys have a good night.